Hey guys, just want to make a quick video about the different types of BennVenn ribbons that are out there. These are all designed to use an AGS-101 backlit display on a Game Boy Color, but there's a few different differences in all the different version numbers. This is one of the earlier ones. This is a version 2.0. I think only a handful of these were made. It was one of the kind of a prototype one. It does work, but I doubt any of you are going to have one of these. I think the majority of you might have one of these. This is a 2.1. These worked best with Game Boy Color version, the motherboard version 05 and 06. And if you had anything less than that, you needed one of these little things called a gizmo, which is like a little regulator for the crystal oscillator that you had to connect a few different wires. I'm going to show you how to install this one in just a minute here. After 2.1 came a big improvement in version 2.3. This one had its own, I think this is the crystal oscillator here built in, so it bypasses the one that's on the motherboard, and the software has been updated, so this runs on every single Game Boy Color. You just plug it in, just like that. Connect up your LCD. And you should be good to go. You turn it on, and there you go, Game Boy Color. There's been a lot going on recently because BennVenn is releasing a new version, 2.4 and 3.0. So in the meantime, they've been kind of hard to get a hold of. So people have been trying to get these 2.1 ribbons, but they've had a lot of issues with the gizmos and whatnot. So there's a couple other versions here. This is a 2.1 that comes with this tiny little board. And what this board does is basically has the crystal oscillator and some code that converts this 2.1 into a 2.3. So this essentially runs on all Game Boy Colors. But it does require soldering a wire and a few little points on here, which again, I'll show you how to install this one. And then some of you may be lucky enough to have a 2.1 that's already pre-soldered and ready to go, that's been converted into a version 2.3. I doubt any of you have this, but if you do, it's pretty much the same as this 2.3. Pretty much plug it in and it's ready to go. So the main ones that I'm going to be showing you today are these two here. These are both 2.1s. And this one's a little bit simpler because it just has a little gizmo. But this one's a lot more stable if you get the one with the little crystal oscillator board. There's a couple other options that you have. This is a digital backlight brightness controller. The newer boards, the newer ribbons, like version 2.4, comes with this built in. So basically what this does is it allows you to adjust the brightness of the screen with the D-pad up and down right on your Game Boy Color as you're playing a game. Previously you had to install this little board separately if you wanted to be able to control that. This is an optional thing, but again, I'll show you how to install one of those. And then the most recent one that's going to be coming out soon is version 3.0. And that one, as most of you guys know, the display on these, when you use one of these ribbons, makes a smaller area than the Game Boy Color lens allows. And that leaves a white border around there. So on the newest one, the 3.0, it blacks out that white border, so it's just solid black, so you don't have to do any masking. It does leave a tiny bit along the top, which you do have to mask, but it makes it way, way easier. You could, of course, use a custom lens with a smaller opening, but again, it's entirely up to you. And yeah, so I've shown you the 2.3. Now let's go ahead and install this 2.1. Okay, so actually the first step in installing a 2.1 ribbon is to do what's called the pin 3 mod. So what that means is on this is the VRAM chip. Pin number 3, if you count from the left, pin number 1, 2, 3. You want to lift up pin number 3 by applying just a little bit of heat to it and using something like a razor blade or a maybe some tweezers. I like to just kind of get under the edge of it, like this, and then pry while applying some heat. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. And this is a little bit tricky on camera, but I'll do my best here. So 1, 2, 3. Just like that. So I'll get a good close-up here. So right there, you can see the pin is now lifted up. And what we're going to be doing is attaching a wire from this pin to this little capacitor on this side right here. So just running a wire from there to there. Just straighten it out a little bit. It's probably a good idea to use some flux if you have it. And I like to use this, this 30 gauge wire. It's pretty small. This type of wire can be kind of tricky to cut. So one kind of trick is to take your wire and get a sharp X-Acto and put it on the edge of a table and get right where you want to trim the exposed wire, or to trim the red part, the casing. I forget what it's called, but when you want to trim off the when you want to expose the wire, you want to just like roll your razor blade and then turn it sideways and then pull, and that kind of reveals the wire there. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not. Sometimes you have to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side, but it should be pretty good. And the length of wire is pretty short, so you can kind of just like measure, and then a little bit longer is okay because you can kind of bend the wire into shape if you need to. So I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut it about right here. Make sure you hold onto that little piece because it's really tiny. And then I'm going to go ahead and flip this around to expose the wire on the other side here. Kind of just roll it and slide. There we go. With 30 gauge wire, it might even be okay to just use your soldering iron and kind of melt away the tip if you're having trouble. So now what you want to do is apply a little bit of flux here, maybe a little bit on the pin that was lifted. And I like to hold my wire with some tweezers and just kind of tin the edges a little bit. It just takes a tiny, tiny amount. So I'm just going to put some on the soldering iron tip and just do it like this. Just get a little bit on there, and I'm going to go ahead and tin the lifted pin as well. And just add a little bit on there. It's probably too much, but okay. So now go ahead and take your wire and attach it to the pin, like that. Okay, and now take your other end here, and you might need to kind of bend it into shape a little. I'm going to go ahead and add a tiny bit more solder to the capacitor. There we go, just like that. And now take your tweezers and kind of push it into place. These are really tiny components, so you don't want to overheat them. It just takes a tiny little touch. And then kind of flatten that pin down with the wire. And I like to use this Kapton tape. So just cut a little strip and cover up that whole area. Just like that. And that part's done. Okay, so now the next step is to prepare the little gizmo here. Kind of same thing, you just want to tin the little pads. So there's 4 pads. There's the input, output, 3-volt, and ground. So I'm just applying a little bit of flux. You don't have to apply flux, but it helps the solder flow where you want it to go. And then I already have a little bit of solder on there. And then just go ahead and apply a little bit of solder to each pad. My soldering iron might be a little bit too hot, but here we go. And because this is I'm going to be placing it about right here above the crystal oscillator, what I like to do is, after this cools, get some more Kapton tape. And just cut a little piece and put it on the back side of this, of the gizmo. And then just trim away the excess here. Just like that. So now you don't even notice that it's there. It's just coating the back. And then I like to place it so in and out are facing down, and you can read the word gizmo in the correct orientation. And we're going to be placing it right here above the crystal oscillator, just like that. And what I like to do is just apply a little bit of hot glue, just a little dab like that. And place this there, and kind of press it down, and that should be it. So now we need to run 4 wires. So I'm going to go ahead and put the ribbon in place. You don't have to lock it down, but I'm just going to lock it down. So basically, this part's pretty simple. If you look at this crystal oscillator on the side here, there's 2 little points. You want to use this point here. So basically what's going to happen is it's going to go from the crystal oscillator here to the input on the gizmo. So run 1 wire to there, and then 1 output here to the clock over here. This crystal oscillator acts as a clock because these old CPUs don't have any kind of clock built into them. So we're basically bypassing the clock. So from the input, it goes to this first little pad thing here, and then the output goes to the clock. And then 3-volt goes to 3-volt, and ground goes to ground. I'm also going to tin 3-volt and ground, these 2 little pads here. So a little bit of flux. And these are pretty tiny, so there's 3 volts. And ground, okay. And clock should be good. Just freshen the solder there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cut some wire and jump ahead. Okay, so next is to install the wires. I've cut some wires over here. Here's a really, really tiny one for the crystal oscillator here. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach that like this. This one's just a really short little wire. like that. So that goes from that pad to in, and then I'm going to attach the one for 3 volt here. This one for the output that goes to the clock. Oops. And this one for the ground. Okay, so now we have all our wires connected to the gizmo. And I'm going to kind of like route these. So the output goes to the clock here. So out to clock. Ground goes to ground. This one's a little bit longer. And oops, I'm going to attach this one well enough. Let me get a little closer here. There we go. And now 3 volts is going to go to 3 volt, just like that. So I'm going to start with 3 volt because that's the furthest and it's going to get in the way if I'm trying to solder the other ones here. So I'm just going to grab that, hold it in place. There we go, 3 volt. And now this one is the ground. So again, hold it in place. Just like that. And now here is the output to the clock. Just like that, okay? And now let's go ahead and test it. And there we go, Game Boy Color. So with these older 2.1 ribbons, you need to adjust this potentiometer here. It's kind of hard to see. I'm going to turn this light off. So you can see that the screen is a little bit washed out looking. So there's a little potentiometer right here. And as you adjust it, you can see the screen kind of change. You're going to adjust it until it's as bright as it can get. And that looks good. If you don't do the pin 3 mod, you'll hear some like high-pitched humming from the speaker. So that definitely helps with that, and it also helps with some other things. But that's basically how to do the 2.1 ribbon. Now we're going to do the 2.1 that's been converted to a 2.3 ribbon. Okay, so here's another motherboard. Here's the 2.1 ribbon, and this is the little chip with the oscillator and whatever else built into it to convert this into a 2.3 ribbon. So that basically makes this more stable, and it makes it run on every version of motherboard. So first thing, I noticed these kind of come with this little bit here, so we don't need that. I'm just going to trim that off. Like that. And it looks good. Okay, and it's gonna go this way. So this one is going to be soldered directly to the ribbon. So I'll show you, this goes about right here. And I have a completed one over here so I can show you. This is what it looks like. So basically we're going to be soldering this board on this little pad here to this side of the capacitor, this top pad to the bottom of this capacitor, this pad to the clock here, and then this little pad on the top of these things all the way to we're going to run a wire all the way to this capacitor back here on the ribbon itself. Okay, so the first step is to kind of tin the little pads here. So I'm going to add a little bit of flux. This also helps protect some of the components, because as you heat up some of these components, it could heat up the other things, and these are so tiny that it's really, really difficult. I have a couple sets of tweezers here. I have these that are kind of flat on the end so they don't poke anything. Makes it really easy for picking up. And okay, so now I need to tin them. So I'm going to add some solder to the little pads. So sometimes it's easiest if you apply a little bit of solder to the tip of your soldering iron and then just dab that onto the pad. And it's usually enough to kind of tin it. So there's that one tinned. And this one could use a little bit more. Okay, there's that one. There we go. And now the one on, this is going to be the left side. It's kind of a lot, but it's going to be okay because we kind of need a lot to attach it to that capacitor there. Okay, so now just set this into place. And basically you want to make sure that the rightmost pad is going to be touching the clock. Like we're going to run a little, either a wire or a little bit of solder there. And then the leftmost pad is going to be attached to that capacitor right here. Okay, just make sure that that's bridged. So you want the top of that, or the right side of that capacitor to touch that little pad there. And that kind of holds it in place so that you can do the rest. Okay, so to now attach this pad to the clock, it's easiest I found to just take a little bit of wire. I'm going to cut just the tiniest little piece here. So this is literally all we need. And then I'm going to attach it to the pad and then bend it and attach it to the clock. So okay, so now it's attached to the pad. So now I'm going to kind of bend this. And it's really tricky because it's so tiny. Get a little bit of extra solder on the tip of my soldering iron. And you just want to bridge that connection there. Just like that. Okay. Now we're going to do one more, just like that, with the same wire. From this pad here, the top, there's two pads on the top, there's one on the right. We're going to go to the bottom of this capacitor here. Get your wire and trim a little piece. work right next to a motorcycle repair shop, so sorry for the background noise. Okay, so attach the wire to that little pad there. And bend it into place. And apply some solder. It heats up kind of the whole thing, so you gotta have to be careful, but there we go. I think that looks okay. Let's see. Yep, it's connected there. Should be connected. We'll test it. And now finally we need to run a wire from all the way down here, all the way up to this capacitor up here. So I'm going to get a longer piece of wire. About that. And you want to give it a little bit extra because we're going to have to bend the this wire later. Or we're going to have to fold the ribbon and the wire needs to go like over it. Okay, and now this wire's long enough, I don't need to use tweezers, so I'm just going to hold this with my hand. There we go. That should be attached now. And now this wire needs to go all the way over to this capacitor here. And if it's a little long, it's okay because we're going to be folding it over, and you know. So I like it to be kind of flat on the end. So I'm just bending that into shape a little bit. And I definitely need to add a little bit more solder to the capacitor here. Just like that. And attach your wire. And we should be good. Now to test it, we'll put it into our Game Boy Color. And you have to remember, you need to lock these down when you're testing. When I first started doing this, I remember I put in a ribbon and I didn't lock it down because I was just testing real quick. And it wouldn't work, and I thought there was something wrong, but it was basically just I had to lock these down. It makes the pins inside here make contact. Okay, so let's attach our screen. And hopefully, you gotta remember there's metal back here if you haven't removed it yet, so I'm gonna just hold this up. I don't want it to short anything out down here. So plug it in and we're good to go. I need to remind you that we did convert this to a 2.3, but we also do need to do the pin 3 mod. You can kind of hear, that buzzing sound. Yeah, that buzzing is because we didn't do the pin 3, and you can see some like lines on the screen. And to adjust this a little bit. So, yep. Seems to be working. We just need to do the pin 3 mod now. And this one should be good to go. And that's how to convert the 2.1 to the 2.3. All right, so that's pretty much it for this one, guys. If you have any questions, please leave them below. I will be showing how to do the digital backlight brightness controller in another video. I have another video on how to backlight a Game Boy Advance, a DMG. I have a few other videos coming out, how to paint Game Boys. Let me know what you guys would like to see. If you have any questions at all, you can always leave a comment below or email me. And also, I'm having a sale right now on my website, esotericmods.com. If you want to buy a backlit Game Boy Color or send in one of your own, they're discounted right now until the end of September. So now's a good time to get one if you've wanted one. So that's it. I'll see you guys next time.